Hello and welcome. Thank you for being here today. This is where we turn vision into reality, one thought at a time. The title for today's talk is Imagination, the Workshop of the Mind. Tonight, we turn towards something intimate, powerful, and frequently very misunderstood: imagination. This is not a fantasy, it's not a denial of reality, and it's not a childish play. Imagination is the inner lab of consciousness, the place where possibilities are assembled together, tested, rehearsed, and energized long before they appear as lived events in our lives. It is the silent studio behind every visible creation. Every invention humanity has ever produced, every relationship we have ever entered into, every fear we have ever trembled before, every hope that has ever lifted the heart, each began as an image in the beginning in our mind, a subtle movement, a shaping within awareness. Before something becomes physical, it is first informational. Before it becomes visible, it is first imagined. History makes this clear too. Before the airplane, someone allowed the mind exceed gravity and picture human being flying in the air. Before healing occurs, someone dares to imagine a body restored its health and balance into health. And before wars erupted, for example, someone imagined danger, division among different groups, or enemy. Before reconciliation, someone imagined peace. Imagination precedes experience in the real world, the way a blueprint always precedes a building. It is not the final structure, but it quietly organizes what later becomes solid, measurable, and shared. This is why imagination is not trivial, it's formative. It participates in perception and guides behavior and influences the emotion and prepares the nervous system, for example, for what it expects to encounter in the real world. In other words, imagination is not separate from life. It is one of the forces shaping it. The workshop is always ongoing. It's always active, and the mind is always basically sketching different imagery and sceneries, and after some time in the future, it becomes your reality, whatever you think about. The question is rarely whether we are imagining or not, because we are always imagining something. The real question is, what are we building inside our brain? Because the quality, tone, and repetition of the images or sceneries that we cultivate become part of the architecture through which we meet the world. We may be designing limitation without even knowing it, without even realizing, or we may be quietly preparing expansion. We may be constructing rooms of fear or opening corridors of possibilities and potential. Imagination is a workshop of the mind. And the structures raised there, subtle at first, even invisible, we can say, often become the landscape of our lived experiences in the future. So tonight we begin by entering the workshop with awareness, not to control it, not to judge it, but to see it clearly. For once we can see what is being built, we gain the freedom to build differently and be in charge and be in control of what is being built. So now let's talk about imagination, which is a faculty of consciousness. Many people dismiss imagination as something unreal, something secondary, something that belongs to fantasy rather than real life. But try a simple experiment. Close your eyes and vividly imagine biting into a fresh lemon. See the color in your mind, smell the citrus, feel the texture as your teeth press into it. Notice what happens in your body. Your mouth begins to water. Your facial muscles react. Your body prepares for sourness. Chemistry shifts. Nothing actually happened in the external world. And yet internally, a cascade of responses was triggered as if it really had happened in the real world. It turns out that the nervous system in our body does not draw a hard line between a vividly imagined event and a physically occurring one in the real world out there. To the body, a well-formed inner experience is still experienced, no difference. But why would this be? Because imagination is not separate from consciousness. It is something consciousness does. It is one of the primary ways awareness explores possibility, stimulates outcomes, learns, anticipates, and creates meaning in our lives. Imagination is a built-in capacity for rehearsal. Through this, we try different possibilities for our futures. We revisit past. We construct identities. We prepare different responses depending on the situation. In the sense, imagination is not decorative. It's functional for our well-being and success in the real world. It's creative because it generates patterns the system can later enact. It is informational because it carries signals about what we believe, our fears, our desires. And it is causal because those internal patterns influence physiology, emotion, and behavior. Long before action happens in the outer world, movement has already occurred in the inner one. Imagination prepares perception. What we expect influences what we notice. What we repeatedly picture becomes easier to recognize. The mind becomes tuned to confirm its inner imagery. Reticular activating system, or RAS for short, acts like a GPS inside our mind. So basically you put the destination, which is your desire or your wish. You need something in the real world to happen. You put that in the RAS system, and without any effort on your end, you pick up that word from the scenes that you see, from the words that you hear, from the pictures that you see in a magazine or in TV, and your brain is working 24/7, even when you are sleeping, to get the shortest way to get to that point. It acts exactly like a GPS. Imagination organizes expectation, and expectation powerfully shapes experience around us. How we interpret events, how we meet people, how open or defensive we become to different signals. It also guides attention. Out of millions of bits of sensory data available in our environment at every single moment, attention selects only a tiny fraction. What determines that selection? In large part, the images and narratives already alive inside our brain is in charge. We tend to see what we are prepared to see, and attention, once directed, begins to sculpt our reality. It influences our decisions, our postures, the tone of voice, risk tolerance that we have, our confidence, and countless micro behaviors that ripple outward into the results that we get in our outer environment. So the path becomes clear. Imagination shapes expectations, and expectations directs the attention. Attention influences action, and action produces outcomes. And outcomes, over time, look very much like life itself. When we understand this, imagination can no longer be treated as trivial or unreal. It is one of the quiet architects behind the scenes of experience. We are always imagining. The deeper invitation is to become aware of how we are imagining and whether those inner rehearsals are building the life we wish to step into or building something else. Now let's discuss the blueprint principle. Think of imagination as the drafting table of existence. Before anything rises in the visible world, it is traced in the invisible one, in our brain. An architect does not arrive at an empty field carrying bricks and cement and steel and simply begin stacking them, on top of each other at random to build a building. The process begins with a vision, a concept, a set of lines that describe possibility on the paper. So there is a draft, there is a blueprint. The designer imagines a space before the space exists. She walks the hallways in her mind before anybody else can walk them in matter. The drawing is subtle, quiet, almost weightless, and yet entire buildings sleep inside it. In the same way, the human mind is continuously sketching potential realities. We are drafting emotional structures, relational environments, personal identities, and what we basically envision for our future. Most of the time, we do it without even noticing. We rehearse futures internally. We imagine how a conversation will unfold before it happens. We picture the expression on someone's face. We anticipate tone, outcome, victory, embarrassments, approvals, disappointments, all kinds of things in our life. And we run simulations, basically. Often these simulations are protective. The mind tries to prepare us to reduce uncertainty, to manage the risk that is potentially in our environment. But in doing so, it also plants expectations. We imagine failure before we attempt something, especially something new, and that's for our protection. And we imagine rejection before we reveal ourselves. We imagine misunderstandings before we explain ourselves. We imagine loss before we love somebody. And then when life begins to echo these preparations, we call it coincidence, fate, or bad luck. And yet, in many cases, we are walking through structures that we have been quietly designing in our mind. The blueprint is not building, but builders, behaviors, choices, and perceptions often organize themselves around the blueprint. If I enter a room expecting hostility, my body tightens, my voice changes, my interpretations sharpen, and my reactions may help produce exactly what I feared. The sketch begins to harden into walls. This is not mystical punishment, it's psychological and energetic momentum. Inner rehearsal influences outer participation. The mind becomes familiar with certain outcomes and unconsciously steers toward them because familiarity feels like safety, even when it is painful. So imagination is not merely daydreaming, it's pre-existence. It is the shaping of pathways along which attention and action will later travel. And because we repeat certain images again and again in our mind, they gain strength. They become default mechanism or default designs. The more frequently we picture something, the easier it is for the system to reproduce it. Which brings us to a profound and honest question. What are we repeatedly designing inside our brain? What emotional rooms are we furnishing every day? What narratives are we reinforcing? What future we are normalizing through repetition of imagery and sceneries in our mind? Are we building narrow corridors or open landscapes of hope and happiness? Barriers or bridges? Defense or invitation? To become conscious of imagination is to stand at the drafting table, basically, while the drawing is still fluid. It is the moment where change is easiest, where a line can be softened or changed or expanded or even erased. Because once the structure solidifies into behavior and circumstance, modifications become harder. So awareness at the level of blueprint is the power. If we learn to notice what we are sketching, at each moment, we gain the possibility of sketching differently, more powerfully, be more in control. And that is where freedom begins. Now let's talk about imagination and emotional charge. Images by themselves are often faint. They pass through the mind like sketches drawn in light, noticeable but not necessarily influential. A picture appears and then fades. It may entertain, distract, or briefly inspire, but it does not always leave a deep mark. However, when an image is infused with emotion, something very different happens. It gains weight. It gains momentum. It becomes instruction. Images plus emotion are powerful. Emotion is energy in motion. It is body's way of signaling importance, relevance, urgency. It tells the nervous system, the subconscious, the whole psychological network, pay attention. This matters. The moment emotion is added to the imagery and scenery in our mind, that is no longer causal. It becomes a priority. It begins to organize memory, perception, and readiness in our body and our surrounding. And eventually it becomes our reality. A fearful imagination imprints survival mode and patterns. The body tightens. The breathing changes. Attention narrows. Defensive strategies activate. Even if the danger exists only in our mind, the system appears as if it was real. A loving imagination, on the other hand, imprints openness. Our muscle softens. Our breath deepens. Connection becomes easier. Trust becomes more available. The system begins preparation for welcoming rather than protection. A confident imagination prepares action. Energy mobilizes itself. Possibilities feel reachable. The body leans toward participation. And in each case, the emotional tone attached to the image or scenery becomes the shaping factor or the shaping force. This is why the subconscious is influenced far less by what we say and far more but what we feel while imagining. We can repeat positive statements all day long, positive affirmations, but if the emotional atmosphere underneath them is missing or is doubt or fear, the deeper system will follow the emotion. Subconscious only knows the emotion. Emotion is the language the body understands, the subconscious understands. It is the link that makes the image permanent. Without emotion, imagination is light suggestion. With emotion, it becomes programming. So there would be a result. This helps us understand something crucial and often surprising. Worry is creative. When we worry, we are not merely thinking about what we do not want. We are vividly imagining it, emotionally energizing it, rehearsing it, and preparing the system to notice and respond to it. We are building familiarity with an unwanted future. But gratitude is also creative. When we feel thankful, we imagine support, sufficiency, connection, possibilities of all kinds. The body receives those signals and begins orienting itself toward them. Attention opens to opportunities that match the emotional rehearsal. In both cases, imagination is at work. Both are acts of inner creation. One builds tension, while the other one builds receptivity and coherence. Neither is passive. So the key is not whether we are imagining. We always are. The key is what emotional signature are we giving to the images we repeatedly rehearse in our mind? Because that signature is what the deeper mind will translate into posture, expectation, and behavior. If we become aware of this process, we gain extraordinary influence over our actions and environment and future. We can begin to pair our images with qualities we want to cultivate steadiness, compassion, capabilities, and peace around us. We can learn to feel the future differently before we step into it. And in doing so, we participate consciously in the shaping of experience in our future. Imagination becomes not a runway force, but a deliberate art that you enjoy doing it. Now let's talk about guided versus unconscious imagination. Here is where responsibility quietly but unmistakably enters the picture. Up to this point, imagination might seem automatic, something that simply happens. Images rise, emotions follow, reactions unfold. It can feel mechanical to some point, inevitable, even impersonal. But the moment we notice the process, we discover something important, that we are not only participants, we are also potential directors. It's like a movie that you're directing. You can change the actors, you can change the scenery, you can change the scenario, the story. You're in charge. If we do not consciously choose our inner images, the mind will default to what it already knows. It will replay familiar material, past hurts, moments of embarrassments, old betrayals, sins of failure. The system prefers the known, even when the known is painful. Old identities repeat. I am the one who is overlooked. I am the one who must struggle always. I am the one who is having bad luck. I'm the one who is getting hurt always. I'm the one who must prove everything. These self-concepts become characters continually recast in new situations. Different stage, same script. And that's your life. We anticipate disappointment before it happens. We expect difficulty before we begin. We brace for endings before beginnings have had a chance. This is unconscious imagination. It is creative, yes, but it is creative from memory rather than possibility. It is past attempting to become the future, just because it looks familiar. And because it operates below deliberate awareness, it can feel like truth instead of habit. And yet awareness introduces flexibility. Once we see the machinery, we are no longer completely run by it. We discover we can shift, not by force, not by denial, but by gently introducing new images, new emotional tones, new rehearsals in our mind. We can deliberately imagine clarity. We can picture ourselves understanding and being understood. We can see conversations unfolding with mutual respect and understanding. We can allow solutions to appear in the inner field before they appear outside. We can deliberately imagine connection, sense warmth between ourselves and others, feel belonging, rehearse cooperation instead of defense. We can deliberately imagine capability, seeing ourselves acting with steadiness, creativity, and intelligence. We feel competence in the body before the task begins in reality. We can deliberately imagine peace, picture moving through challenges with grounded breath, imagining responding rather than reacting. sensing stability even in uncertainty. These are not fantasies, they are alternative blueprints that are available to us. We just need to select. The workshop of the mind can run on accident, recycling history, reinforcing limitation, repeating emotional grooves, or it can run by intention, opening space for patterns that have not yet had the chance to live. The shift is subtle but profound in your life. Instead of asking, what will probably happen? We begin asking, what would I like to cultivate? Instead of being dragged by inherited imagery, we begin participating in conscious design the way we want it. This is responsibility in its most empowering sense. Not blame for the past, but authorship of what we continue to rehearse. And every time we choose a new image with sincerity and emotional presence, we lay down a new pathway in front of us. At first, it may feel unfamiliar. Over time, it becomes available and easy for us. Eventually, it can become natural. The workshop has always been active, and now we are learning how to enter it with our eyes open, so deliberately. Now let's discuss imagination as a bridge in our life. Imagination is also a bridge between states of consciousness. It is a movement mechanism. Through this, awareness can travel from one inner landscape to another without the body even needing to go anywhere at all. In a single moment, the mind can shift orientation, perspective, emotional climate, if we are alert of what's going on. We move along invisible pathways. Imagination allows transition from fear toward possibility in 1 second, from separation toward connection immediately, from limitation toward expansion just in a second. Notice how this happens. When fear dominates, the inner imagery tends to narrow. The future looks tight, defined by threats, risks, or memories that are not pleasant. Options seems few. The world appears heavy and predetermined. But introduce even a image image of possibility in your brain. A door opening, a conversation going well, help arriving, clarity emerging, and the emotional atmosphere around you begins to change. All of a sudden, space appears where there was contraction. Breath returns. The system reorganizes itself. Nothing external may have shifted yet, but consciousness has begun moving. Likewise, imagination can carry us from separation to connection. If I picture, for example, myself alone, excluded, misunderstood all the time, my body mirrors that reality. Distance feels real. But if I imagine being met, heard, welcomed, something softens inside me. Empathy becomes easier in my mind. Communication becomes more likely to happen. The bridge has been crossed internally before it is crossed externally in the real world. And imagination can move us from limitation to expansion. The sense of I can't often rests on repeated images of failure or incapacity. Replace those with images of learning, adapting, discovering new things, or unexpected support, showing up in front of you. And the horizon widens. New behavior becomes imaginable, and what is imaginable becomes reachable in reality. For explorers of awareness, meditators, travelers of inner state, participants in deep experiential work, imagination often grows more vivid, symbolic, and more alive. Why does this happen? Because perception is gradually loosening from strict dependence on physical input. When attention withdraws from the outer senses, the inner field becomes brighter, more detailed, more fluid. Imagery becomes a language by itself. Symbols arise that communicate complex meaning easily and instantly. Scenes form that convey emotional truth. Metaphors appear that reorganize understanding of different subjects and concepts. In these moments, imagination is not mere invention, it is reception and translation. Images become carriers of information. They may reveal aspects of the psyche. They may express unresolved issues and material. They may point toward healing or integration. They function like multi-dimensional messages that we receive, feel, and see, and understand all at once. The workshop is no longer a flat room with static pictures. It becomes a spacious, dynamic, layered around us. A movement happens not only across time, but across depth. And we might encounter memory, archetype, intuition, creative insights, all arriving through imaginational form. In deeper states, imagination and perception begin to overlap. Seeing becomes knowing. Feelings become understanding. The bridge grows, and what once seems just imagination reveals itself as one of consciousness's most sophisticated instruments for transformation. It allows us to leave one organization of reality and enter another. What once seemed just imagination reveals itself as one of consciousness's most sophisticated instruments for transformation. It allows us to leave one organization of reality and enter another. And every time we cross, we bring something back with ourselves, a little more openness, a little more courage, a little more freedom in how we inhabit experience. The workshop becomes multidimensional, and we begin to realize we are far more mobile within consciousness than we ever suspected. Now let's discuss a few practical applications. So how do we bring all of these down from philosophy into ordinary life? How do we work with imagination on a Tuesday afternoon, in a conversation, in a decision, and a quiet moment before sleep? We begin with noticing. Notice what you rehearse internally in your mind, in your memory. Because whether we realize it or not, we are almost always practicing something. The mind loves rehearsing. It runs sceneries again and again, refining them multiple times, strengthening them, making them familiar. But what are these scenes? Are you practicing arguments that have not yet happened? Perfecting your defense? Preparation for your counterattack? Are you practicing defeat? Seeing yourself failing before you begin something? Watching the opportunity close? Missing things? Feeling the embarrassment in advance? Feeling the disappointment? If so, the system becomes skilled at those experiences which are negative. Practice makes patterns efficient, and yet we can practice something else. We can practice dignity. We can picture ourselves standing, speaking, moving with self-respect and calm presence. We can practice warmth, or imagine listening generously, meeting others with openness, allowing friendliness to shape our posture and tone. We can practice capability, seeing ourselves learning, adapting to different people, different situations, responding intelligently to challenges that we will have. We feel resourcefulness instead of paralysis. This is not pretending, it's training. Athletes understand this deeply, and long before the competition that they are going to have, they run the race in their minds. They feel the muscles engage, the timing unfold, the victory or a strong finish that occurs in the mind. Brain imaging studies even show that mental rehearsal activates many of the same neural pathways as physical practice itself. So musicians do the same thing too. They hear the piece internally, sense the transitions, anticipate the difficult passages. By the time they step onto the stage, the terrain is already familiar in their mind. So they have no issue rehearsing it in reality, in practice. Leaders do the same thing. They envision the meeting, they envision the negotiation, the speech that they are going to, present. They prepare emotionally for steadiness and clarity. They build the inner experience before the outer moment arrives. And because the mind-body system has already visited that territory before in the mind, it can enter it with greater confidence in reality. This is available to all of us. Each day provides dozens of opportunities for subtle rehearsals like this, before making a phone call, for example, before entering a room, before answering an email, before falling asleep. You can rehearse all of these in your mind and become expert in doing the best way, that is possible for you. We can take a few seconds and ask, what would I like embody here? What would I like to embody here in my life at this moment, at this stage? Then we allow an image and a feeling to arise that represents it. Calm competence, kindness, precision, courage, love. These small moments seem insignificant, but they can accumulate. Small repeated images shape identity. They begin to answer the question, who am I becoming? If I repeatedly imagine myself as patient, I start to experience myself that way. If I consistently rehearse anxiety, that too becomes familiar and automatic. Identity, once formed, shapes our behavior. We act in ways that are consistent with who we think we are. And behavior expressed over time shapes our destiny. Not in a dramatic, mystical sense, but in a quiet arithmetic of daily choices that we make, relationships, risks that we take or avoid. So imagination is not separate from practical life. It is one of the most immediate tools we have in our hands for influencing how we show up within it. We are always participating in something. The invitation is to practice consciously, to build inner familiarity with the qualities we want to live. And then when the moment arrives, we discover something remarkable. We are ready because we have already rehearsed it. We have already been there in our mind. So we know what to do and how to act. And finally, let's talk about becoming a conscious builder. You're already using imagination every day. The only question is whether it is accidental or deliberate. Inside you is a workshop of infinite creative capacity that is present. You can build prisons or you can build doorways to heaven. You can construct fear or you can design freedom. Tonight and in the days ahead, gently observe, what am I constructing within my mind? Because life very often is the echo of that invisible architecture that you are rehearsing in your mind. With this, we end the session today. Thank you so much for being here. Until the next time, this is Afsane reminding you your future is calling.